Yeehaw! We're back with another episode. 176, Steve. Where does the time go?
Yeah, I don't know. In the sky? Something like that? I don't know.
Episode 176 of Yes Shift, doing an album review, which we haven't
Yeah.
done together in a little while,
Right. It's been
other
like
than Dave Kersner's.
4 days, something like that. But yeah, thanks to the PR people who sent us this album in advance. So we're talking about Jethro Tull's Curious Ruminant. So do we want to start with like our respective histories with Tull or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, let's do that. And then before we even get to the album cover, I want to talk about the name. But first, let's do exactly what you just said, and you go first.
Right. So I've probably mentioned this before on the show, but 2008, 2009 was when I got into a bunch of prog rock bands, and so I went through all of Jethro Tull's discography up to that point, which at that time would have been up to the Christmas album,
In
2000.
order? In
Yeah, why would I do it out of order?
Some people just throw stuff on. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, but weirdly, looking at the history of some of the prog rock bands, it looks like 2003 was the year when Jethro Tull, Moody Blues, and King Crimson each put out new albums, but then for years and years and years didn't put out any other studio albums for the rest of their duration, except for the case of Jethro Tull, which in the last 3 years, I believe, has put out 3 new albums. The Zealot Gene, I remember hearing bits of that, and I was aware of the marketing of that, and then that was followed by Rock Flute about a year later, which I don't think I've heard that one, weirdly enough. And now,
I don't think so either.
yeah, and now Curious Ruminant, which comes out March 7th from Inside Out. So, yeah, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Passion Play was like my favorite when going through the albums. So was that your favorite as well, Dad?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite all-time albums, actually, and it's one of 3 albums, and probably usually at the top, that is on my highest rotation of music I put on to cook by when I'm cooking dinner, which is most of the time. There's something about it, I don't know, but yeah, it truly is a masterpiece. It really is, and I love Bursting Out, and there's a new version of that coming out, as we've talked about, so that'll be fun to hear. We talked about that. I talked about that with Marco Miniman, but those are my 2 favorite. And Minstrel of the Gallery is right there too. That was Grandpa's favorite, my dad's.
Yeah, and I think that I perhaps don't spin them as much as maybe you do. Like, I feel like it's been a while since I've like actively, the Christmas album recently was the most, before this one was the most recent time I put on a Jethro Tull album from start to finish. So I get the vibe that you're more intimately familiar and I'm like coming back into it type thing.
And to that, I'm honestly less familiar with stuff, strangely enough, from the Don Perry drummer era onward. Like, I'm familiar with some of the stuff Don did, and I love it, and I love him, and I love his drumming. Great guy, great musician. But my familiarity runs much more deeply with what a lot of people would consider the classic lineup, and really there's 2 with Ian Anderson and either the Bursting Out lineup, and then the lineup right after that where Dave Pegg took over on bass.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess we should mention the lineup for this. So on our notes, I've put how long each person has been in the band. So next to Ian Anderson, I put since forever. Does flute,
Literally.
vocals, some guitars, and bunch of things.
It's funny because they have that song that's very old called The year one. This song dates back to the year one, as he says on Bursting Out. That's funny that you put since forever.
Yeah. And we've also got on bass David Goudier, who's been with the band since 2007. John O'Hara, who does piano, keyboards, and accordion, also since 2007. On drums, they've had Scott Hammond since 2017. But for this album, he's only on 2 tracks. I'm not sure which ones, but because of his schedule, he was only able to play on 2 of the tracks. So they had James Duncan, who I guess was like a guest drummer for them. And people can correct me if I'm wrong, but looking online, like they listed him as a guest musician. He was with them from 2007 to 2009, and so since he was very available, he drums on this as well. We got Jack Clark, who's new to the band, doing the electric guitar. And we also have Andrew Giddings, who was with the band from 91 to 2007, of course, piano, keyboards, and accordion. So,
and I want to note
returns.
that, one of my other favorite Jethro Tull things that I love listening to and watching is the project he did with Griminelli, a fellow more classical flautist with a small orchestra. And with that, you had James Duncan on drums, and you had David Goudier on bass, and you had John O'Hara on piano, keyboards, accordion, and as the conductor as well. You had Florian, the young man, on guitar. He was very young when he started. He was 21, I think, when he started, and that was like his second year with Tull or something like that. So some crossover there, which is cool.
Yeah, and I see Peter D'Amour. I'm really glad he's correcting me on this. James Duncan is Ian's son, actually. Okay, yeah, thank you for that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I Googled it to make sure, and yeah, it's...
wow, I did not
things
know
are saying
that.
he's Ian Anderson's son, yeah.
How interesting. I wonder if Duncan's his middle name.
Maybe.
And he didn't want to go by, yeah. Huh, I never knew that. Thanks for that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I also see Bernard Fountains tuning in from Pennsylvania, Shane Mullen from South Australia. So thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Good day, mate.
But yeah, that shows you how, like, with Jethro Tull musician history, I'm kind of not as fluent with it as I am with Yes and some other bands, even though I've like listened to the music, you know. Like sometimes there are those bands where like the intricate history, like sometimes it'll take me a while to commit it to memory and such.
Yeah. And the unique thing about those 2 bands, more than any other bands I can think of at the moment, they're both institutions. There's been so many people in and out of those bands. I've completely lost track with Jethro Tull. I mean, completely. With Yes, it's easy. There's been 72 people in and out of the band.
Yeah, just only kidding. 72. No. Right. But yeah, it kind of feels like Jethro Tull currently, like the pace that they've been releasing their latest 3 albums is kind of comparable to Yes's most recent new output. You know, they put out
the 70s. Everyone was putting out an album a year in the 70s and early 80s even.
Yeah, so I guess it is kind of like getting closer to that rate. Like even if it's not one a year, it's one every 2 or 3 years now, which is still great that they're still working on this stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this album has 9 tracks. Puppet and the Puppet Master, Curious Ruminant, Dunsinane Hill, The Tibu House, Savannah of Paddington Green, Stygian Hand, Over Jerusalem, Drink from the Same Well, which is 17 minutes long, and then Interim Sleep. So yeah, I took notes while listening to this, and what's funny is you texted me saying you finished listening to the album, and then I was like, oh, that's funny, I'm about to start listening to it. So it's yeah, that was quite a coincidence there.
Interesting. Before I listened to it, like I know what it means to ruminate, but
Yeah,
given the
like to
cover,
contemplate.
yeah,
Yeah.
given the cover, if you could show the cover for a moment, please, while I explain
Yes,
what I
I'll go
did.
ahead and do that. Um,
So I looked
and
up. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, and Ian has explained what it means, but I can let you go first if you want.
Yeah, we'll see if I'm close. So I looked up ruminant, and the first definition that came up was an even two-toed animal, like a giraffe or a camel, a zebra, typically a hoofed animal. And I thought, oh, okay, that kind of explains the cover, maybe. I guess a ram, maybe this and that. And then the next one is a ruminant, someone who, like you said, deeply contemplates and a deep thinker and deeply ruminates on things. So it looks like he's using both meanings here, if I'm correct.
Okay. Yeah, so I was reading the interview that Paul Robinson did with Ian Anderson, and he mentioned, I think Paul brought up that possible definition, or maybe Ian recalled someone else telling him that, but he was like, but it means to like be contemplative about something. But it is kind of funny that it fits here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of the lyrics, that interview also mentioned how and I don't know if I would have clocked this if I hadn't read that interview, but some of the lyrics have more like first person perspective words, like I and me, and
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. Is Jethro Tull's music, like most of it, known for using more broad terms, like he did this, she did that, and sort of a step back type narrator view?
Yeah. Yeah. Most of it is, let me think of through some songs. Yeah, most of it's third person. If I just take the easy ones to think of off the top of my head, like Locomotive Breath, Aqualung, Songs from the Wood, Lullaby. Yeah, Sweet Lullaby, Thick as a Brick. Yeah, they're mostly third person. So that's interesting. I wonder if this is more of an introspective period for Ian in some way, or just decided to do storytelling from a different perspective. What do you think? Or do you know
Uh,
from the
yeah,
article?
he said it is a bit more personal, but I think they still keep it to where it's not too super specific, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Like
Um,
the asking for a friend line.
right. Yeah. And apparently some of this material was demoed in 2007. So Ian says Drink from the Same Well was a 2000 Semo demo, or what did I say? 2000 Semo demo? 2007 demo for a live performance with Hari Prasad Karasia or Karasia. I'm sure someone will correct me on that. The Indian classical flautist, and the demo harks back to that time, but it was never recorded, released, or actually played during the tour we did with Hari Prasad in
That's
India and Dubai. It was
huh.
set aside and forgotten until my son, I assume that's James Duncan, discovered it on an old computer. He was about to erase some old files and asked, "What's this?" I said, "Oh, that sounds familiar," because it had a working title. I kept the keyboards from that demo and recorded new flutes, bass guitar, drums, cajon, electric guitar, and acoustic guitars, turning it into a big, epic Jethro Tull song. I believe it's the third longest piece I've done. So,
Wow.
yeah,
So
so
third to Passion, Play Thick as a Brick, and this. My
yeah,
God,
sounds like it.
that's
And
interesting.
yeah, and that makes me think about how like some of the some other bands, they'll take demo from a long time ago and reinterpret it as a new thing to put out, and once
Like
in a
Jeff
while.
Downs did. I'm kidding.
Right. No, but like very even other examples from Yes,
Sure.
like Fly From Here, that star as a
Oh
thing.
yeah.
There
Parallel intending to be for Chris's solo album turned into a Yes song, things like that.
Yeah, and there are other examples as well, I'm sure, but every once in a while I'll see, you know, a people here and there be like, why are they relying on material from like a long time ago instead of putting out new stuff? It's like, well, the majority of what they're putting out is new, and either way it's new to your
For us,
ears,
yeah, I
like
don't.
we've never heard all of this.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any reason to measure that, but I think the thinking behind that is, can't they come up with stuff often enough to use something more recent? Well, the answer still might be yes, but there's something that resonates with them from that older piece. So like you write stories, you write novels, you write prose, you write poems, things like that. Do you
Yeah.
ever find something that you wrote a few years ago and rework it a little bit to bring it more to your, maybe I'll use the word more mature, and I mean age, not behavior, perspective, where maybe you're like, now I kind of feel this way about it. Let me tweak it a little. Do you ever do that?
Yeah, I do. In fact, there are ideas and like passages and things I've written for my own novels that go back like maybe early 2010s, maybe even late 2000s if I dig stuff up. I try to keep them all, always check what you're deleting before you delete it. But
Yeah.
but
I don't delete anything I've ever done, not because I'm so proud of it, but you never know how you're going to repurpose it or get ideas
right.
from. It's part of
Right.
your
So
history.
so yeah, I have like this archive of stuff that I've written over the past like 15 years or so. Most of it people haven't seen or read. So am I just supposed to not release them at all? Like it sounds ridiculous.
It does. Wow, that's half your life.
Oh geez, yeah.
And your age now is a little less than half my life. That's crazy. And shout out to Emmanuel Galambe in Malawi. Nice. Thanks for joining us. Malawi, if I remember correctly, is Malawi in Uganda? If it is, we might be seeing you maybe next year. Anyhow, but that is an interesting take, right? Like, why are you putting something out that you wrote? Well, look at Greg Lake. He wrote Lucky Man when he was, 10 years old or 12 years old or something. And look at the hit that became.
Yeah. Okay.
So you
and
never know.
yeah, and Malawi is in East Africa, so it's around there. So
Okay, cool.
but yeah, so I guess should we go over like general thoughts on the album, and then because I wrote like brief notes
Sure.
about the tracks as it went
Do we
through. They're
cover
not
the
too long.
cover? Do we cover the cover enough? I think we kind of did when we talked about the name.
Yeah, and I can show the page with different formats. Let me just screen share that.
Okay, yeah, there's a
real
few different
quick.
formats, and there might
Yeah.
be some additional formats, but we haven't confirmed them all, so we're not going to show everything we dug up. But you could find it on InsideOutMusic.com and dig in.
Yeah, well, let me make sure that's the right link because I don't remember if they're .com or something else.
Or .co or dot.
Okay, yeah, if you go to .com, then yeah. So
Okay.
I'll go ahead and screen share. Like, there's a US version of the site, and there's like the European version of the site. I think this is the US one. So, you see some of Jethro Tull's recent stuff here. Got
A lot
the
of
deluxe.
different ways you can get this. Wow.
Yeah, there's a deluxe ultra clear 2 LP, 2 CD, 2 Blu-ray art book for almost $100 US. There's a CD digipack, so that's almost $17. Got the I guess this is like a CD version of a deluxe version. So it's got 2 CD Blu-ray art book, almost $57. And you got the gatefold black LP booklet.
Wonder what the inside of the gatefold looks like.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. And I really like this picture of, he's wearing the mask. I think that looks pretty cool. But yeah, on the European version of the site, which I'll show real quick, there is a red version of the LP. Let me just get to that. And this comes out March 7th, folks, and you can pre-order it via the link that's in the post.
March 7th is a huge date for me. Do you remember why?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That well, it might not be what you're thinking. That was the day before. March
Oh,
7th.
okay. Yeah.
March 7th is 17 years ago I met Enja on a blind date.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Enja's my wife, for those who don't know.
I mean, it surprises me that it was that long ago. Like, wow,
I know. This is the
17
longest
years.
job I've ever held.
Yeah, so this is what the
That looks
red
cool.
one looks like. Um,
It'll come up on the right, I believe, if you hover over it. Yeah.
oh, yeah,
Oh,
okay.
there it is.
Yeah, it
That
was.
looks cool. I like when they do that with the labels. I love when they incorporate the artwork into a label. I think Yes was the first to do that with the either Union album or um the Keys album. Is the first time I remember seeing artwork from the album incorporated onto the label that I could think of anyway.
Ye- Yeah, yeah, I don't know what the first one was, but that's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And
It's a nice
folks, in case we need to justify talking about Toll on here, in case you need a Yes connection, they
Yeah, because I was
toured.
wondering. No.
They toured with Yes on the Yes album tour. I think it might have even been. I don't know if it was their first US tour or if it was a European leg, but it was in that time period, and John Anderson was like inspired by Ian to like have more stage presence,
Yeah, to
because
step it up. He said Ian was the best performer he had ever seen. That's a huge compliment from
yeah,
anybody.
and years and years later, he even got Ian to be on his 1000 Hands album.
Yeah.
But yeah, so general thoughts on the album. Should I go first, or do you want to go first, or
I'll go first if you don't mind.
okay?
Because I think my take is going to be a little bit more conservative, if you will.
Okay.
And first of all, it's great music. I don't know if I'm the right audience for it. And what I mean by that is I don't want to speak in double entendres or anything like that, but I might not be the right audience because the production is so clean, and that's great. And please, Jethro told all of you, take that as a compliment. But for me, I think my taste with Tull is a bit more gravitas, a bit more grit, if you will. And I know Ian is, how old is he now? He's like 74, 76. He's got to be right in there, right? You could look it up. But I know that voices change with age. Mine
77. He'll be 78 in August.
78. He's got to be close to 80. And his voice, to me, it sounds great, but it sounds too much the same for me from song to song to song. But he still has a great voice. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, I think I would love to hear a live album because I think that's where we'll hear him sound more colorful, if you will. And I don't want this to sound like I think the album sucks. I don't think anyone has the right to say that. We all have different tastes. And I'm just saying, when I think of Songs from the Wood, when I think of Passion Play, when I think of the older stuff where there was a bit more action, there was a bit more gravitas, like I said, there was a bit more grit, whereas this stuff is so clean and pristine. It's almost too clean or pristine for me, but some people may love that, and it's a great accomplishment to make a recording that clean. But I'm just so used to a different Jethro Tull color palette, if you will. Is any of this making any sense?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. Like, there are, on some of the classic material, I guess you could call it, there are more rocky, bombastic moments in places, but
And brevity.
yeah, and what's funny is when I think of Jethro Tull, I think more of the sort of, Ren Fair sounding aspects. But
Yeah,
I
me
guess
too.
I guess because of the flute playing, which is always impressive to me. But
To me, it's that, but
yeah.
it's also a lot of the stringed instruments in the old days, like the mandolin and the lute type stuff, the nylon guitar. That Renaissance-y music is something that's definitely from another past life, but that's why it resonated with me. But not just the bombastic stuff, just it's a different presentation, if you will. I do like the subject matter Everyone's playing is of course outstanding. It's a great band. It just sounds so different for me that maybe I'm holding on to something that, like some people do. You know, how many times do we hear complaints from Yes people saying it's not Yes unless, you know, to me, I almost don't care who's in any band. I'm going by that presentation, that work of art. If you look at a statue, oh, it's not this figure unless so and so chiseled it. You know, it's like, what? It is the work of art that it is. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Yeah, and what's interesting is, like I said, I haven't gone through the two albums before this in depth, but the bits I've heard from the Zealot Gene, there were a couple tracks on that felt closer to mainstream rock, whereas this album feels closer to, like it definitely had the Tullisms, the Zealot Gene, but this I feel had more of the Jethro Tull isms in it. And so I sat down with this and had a drink of wine, but, not too much because I make sure that my senses are like not dulled so I can like soak it in. And I really enjoyed this. I thought that this was a great listen for me. I made my evening after like, such a busy day. And I was really appreciating the moments where, it would remind me of like nature and like film soundtrack type stuff. And I also enjoyed the lyrics as well. So, and
I love that we get a long song too. I love that we're starting to see a little bit more of that again from artists.
Yeah, and I do have a brief note for each of the tracks I could just blow through.
Sure.
But did you want to like
something I want to comment? Just one thing. I like how you did sort of a callback to the Zealot Gene, and that as soon as you said that, I realized my stance on the whole thing. And fair or not, it is what it is. My measuring stick for Jethro Tull, to me, like my internal unconscious measuring stick that you helped me bring out, is Minstrel of the Gallery.
Mm.
Like that's why when A came out with Mark Craney on drums and you had Eddie Jobson on electric violin and keyboards, that was so electronically progressive that I was like, whoa, let me get my... And I saw that tour, and I saw the tour before that for Stormwatch, and it was so different, and it was great, but my measuring stick for this band, this institution, is Minstrel in the Gallery. So it's almost like, so how much 1500s does this harken back to? Not fair, perhaps, but it's just my thing.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So
yeah,
like,
let's have the notes. I'm eager for you to kind of review each song.
Yeah, and I try not to take too much because I soak in the music, but like I tried typing them fast and then am able to like continue experiencing the song. So track 1, Puppet and the Master, it begins with piano and then the flute comes in and there's some gnarly guitar licks, and I like how there's like this Hammond organ sound, and I don't know if it is Hammond or just what I associate with Hammond generally, but I quite liked that as an opening track. And then Curious Ruminant, the title track, slower pace. Sorry, I hesitated there because I realized I typed slower piece, so I'm not sure like if I meant to type that or if I meant whatever. Gentle guitar and flute notes, but then it surprisingly stomps in, with drum sounds. And I was listening to the lyrics, like I count my life in seconds past, and the guitar I feel harkens back to stadium rock sounds of 70s and 80s rock. Track 3, Dunsinane Hill, feels very Ren Fair. There's accordion, of course, it really stands out. At one point, the vocals feel like talking in a slightly electric voice, so I thought that was a neat flavor there. Then we get the Tipu House, which has the familiar flute style that Ian does, where he plays like super fast. That's comparable to the pace of like flipping a deck of cards that make that sound.
Yeah, I love when he
Um,
does that.
yeah, and I love that fast pace. It's a trademark of Jethro Tull.
Hmm.
Savannah of Paddington Green starts with nature sounds, which actually reminded me of that secret track on Open Your Eyes that they also used for like
Yeah,
before the shows on that tour.
yeah. I didn't think of
Um,
that. You're right.
yeah, and it's very minstrel like that song. Then we got Stygian Hand, which I think you could really dance to, and the accordion is very on point. And I found the lyrics here catchy. Symbol of faith, symbol of sacrifice. Over Jerusalem makes you feel like you're a bird flying over the city, examining the history. And they do mention like each with a sad tale. And then, of course, the epic drinks from the same well has very contemplative flute at the start, and then shifts into a what I would call a very danceable groove. And it really could be part of a soundtrack. It makes you think of like the camera panning across
Mm.
landscapes. And then almost 8 minutes in, it feels like a different song now. We finally get the lyrics, and then at about 13:40, there's like a final, danceable sounding shift, and all culminating in a very enigmatic ending, which leads nicely into the final track, Interim Sleep, which begins with a heartbeat. And I enjoyed that track, but I can see how some might feel like, why not just end it with Drink from the Same Well,
That's
but
the only change I would make in the track list.
yeah,
And
I knew that was gonna be a
I
reaction.
knew you'd, I knew you'd know that too. But I don't know if it's part of the storyline, and that's why, or the arc of the. I didn't examine it that much because I only gave it one listen, the whole thing. But you described "Drink from a Well" great with when you talked about the camera panning. It's a very cinematic, theater in the mind, musical song. I love that. But that's the only change I would make. I think I do like Puppet and the Puppet Master as well as the opening track. That's a really great way to open it. Um, it, I hope no one gets me wrong. I think it's a great album. For my imprint of Jethro Tull, I do like a little bit more grunting and growling in his voice, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit, and that's fine.
Yeah, I
Leave
think
that
that's
to
fair.
my-
There are some Jethro Tull albums you might give more spins, whereas I think for my perspective, because I really enjoyed the experience of, sitting down to listen to it with a bit of wine. I think I'm more inclined to revisit this one before I revisit the other ones and the other
Likewise.
latest ones.
Yeah, same
So
here. I do want to let this, soak in a bit. And how many times, like this is for everybody watching and listening, how many times have you put something on and maybe you were like, okay. And then like 3 or 5 more in, like I was that with the original Fly From Here. At first I was kind of,
yeah.
you remember?
Yeah, I remember I was really hyped in the lead up to that album, and then I listened to it, and I was like, okay, it lived up to my expectations. And then you had like a different
I had
trajectory
a
there.
totally different take on it. Hey, Harry Whitley, what's happening? And then I listened to it about 5 or 7 more times, and it just clicked. The productions clicked, the melodies clicked, and my favorite song on that is Chris's song, "The Man You Always Wanted Me to Be." With all the other musical stuff and everything, it's a very folky song. I love Chris's voice, and it's probably in my top 10 Yes albums, which
Oh
says a
wow.
lot. Yeah, how many albums they have? 40.
They have like
counting
20,
reissues, but-
24 maybe, something
so
like
it
that.
might be in my top 10. And so that's one example for me. Rush, there's some Rush albums that were like that for me over the years. Um, some stuff just has to grow on you. So I'm eager to see where this goes. I may end up just hating it and taking everything I said back. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No,
would
yeah,
do
you
a-
could add this to your cooking rotation, maybe.
Maybe. Have you seen them live? And will you see this?
So I have not seen them live, and That's funny. I meant to like look up their tour dates last night, and then I think I got
Well,
busy
while
with
you do
something
that,
else.
it'd be worth seeing live if you've never seen them live, because I don't care what the lineup is, Ian has such a high standard that you'll get a good show. And I saw them twice. I saw them the Stormwatch tour and the A tour, like I mentioned. And he's such a great storyteller, such a great performer, such a great presenter. And I'll never forget, he was the first musician I ever saw in concert, big musician, that stopped a song and started over.
Oh
And
wow.
I remember it very vividly. He was sitting down, the whole band was on stage. We were sitting down. He started to play. Oh, see, now I can't remember. I said so vividly, but uh, he was playing his classical guitar, and it wasn't like the sound was cutting in and out. And he said, "Hold it, hold it, hold it." And a kid, well, kid to me now, he was probably in his 20s, ran out and fuddled with the plug and stuff. And as he ran away off stage, Ian just reached over and grabbed his baseball cap and put it on and counted the song back in. And it was just so nonchalant. Like, some people would freak out if they had to do that, or would just set the guitar down and just let the song go. But the way he handled it, my point is, he's, again, and John Anderson said it best. I mean, if you influence John Anderson, you'll get a good show no matter what the tour album is, no matter what the lineup is, because he has such a high standard. He's not just going to fluff it out there.
Yeah, so it looks like the all the tour dates for this year are in Europe. So I don't know if they'll take this to the US, but
Maybe he took his passport away from the US or something.
yeah, so I'm screen sharing the tour dates here. So
Oh,
they start
Finland.
in
Ismo
yeah,
can go see them.
yeah, they start in Helsinki on your birthday, April 2nd.
Yeah.
So Finland to
Oh,
Budapest, Slovakia, France, Austria, all sorts of
Munich.
countries.
I saw Munich. We should tell Christian to go.
Oh yeah, that's in May.
Yeah.
They got a couple dates in July, August, September,
Brussels,
few
Berlin.
in
They go back and
November.
forth to Germany. That's interesting.
Yeah, Rome, Italy, finishing in Poland for a couple dates
Wow,
in
nothing at all in
December.
the US the whole year. That's interesting.
Yeah, and
They,
again, like I've been like out of the loop in terms of their touring, so I don't know if this is like a new trend for them or if they generally like go to Europe then US or whatever. But
yeah.
in terms of the set list, apparently they like to do a mix of things, the classic stuff and maybe a couple tracks from the new album and a couple tracks from the most recent albums. So I guess that's what people can expect when they go to see
Only a
them.
couple tracks from the new albums? Like, is
Uh,
in two?
yeah, I think like two from this one and maybe a few from the other two newer ones.
Huh.
And
A
then an
few is so
eclectic
different to me than two.
mix of the rest of their discography. At least that's how it sounded like in the interview I read for
It gets
with
more
Ian.
challenging, when a band's been around for so long. Jethro Tull, yes, Genesis, and they have hits of different eras or favorites by fans of different eras. It's like, if you only have, let's just say, 2 hours for round numbers, it's like, how do you, especially if it's a prog band and there's a lot of long songs, like, what do you do, 4 medleys plus the hits? It's like, it's got to get more and more difficult, I would think.
Yeah, but hey, two tracks could mean the 17-minute epic and something else, It
Yeah,
could be a big chunk. That'd
yeah,
be cool if they do that.
absolutely. So cool. Overall, really good album. It's really neat, to see him with a band out there still doing this. It's going to be 78 in August. I think that's outstanding. And like you said, the frequency harkens back to the way it used to go in the 70s and 80s, where every year got an album, then a tour. As soon as they get back, they rest, they do an album. And it was like that with everybody back then.
Yeah, and apparently the bulk of this album and the lyrics were done in just May and June of last year, according to Ian.
Oh,
Yeah, so
awesome.
that's impressive.
Yeah, very cool.
All
Well,
right.
I'll report back after I listen to it a few times, which I will do.
All right. Yeah, I'll definitely give it more listens as well. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. You can follow us at Yes Shift on Facebook, YouTube, anchor.fm/yesshift. You can search Yes Shift in a podcast app. You'll probably find us. We're easy to find. And you can email yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com with any feedback and ideas and whatnot.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone.